Good afternoon, innovators. David Wright here, and I am your host of Disruptive Innovators, the Champions of Digital Business podcast. And today, been looking forward to this for a long, long time. I am honored to be joined by Dr. Aalpen Patel. Dr. Patel, it's a pleasure to have you on.
It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Of course, of course. Uh, Dr. Patel, for those of our listeners who I know you've done quite a few things, and I'm excited to kind of dive into your journey. But for those of our listeners who may not be familiar with your body of work, could you just tell everybody a little bit about your current role?
Sure. I am Chief Clinical Innovation Officer for a company called MedQuest Imaging. It's a leading outpatient imaging partner in the US, and we operate a network of nearly 50 imaging centers, radiology imaging centers today. And we're always growing to meet the ever increasing need for our services, high quality imaging services. As patients, populations are growing older, those services are on ever increasing demand. So we're trying to meet that need. And our model is focused on development of joint ventures and management agreements with health systems and hospitals, where we help them to improve outpatient imaging, improve efficiency, and plan for rising problems such as workforce shortages now and in the future, as well as remote and on the horizon kind of workflows in radiology. And that's where innovation comes in to support the workforce as well as the increasing needs of the patient. So a lot of good stuff going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was reading up about MedQuest. We're friends with a lot of the guys in the radiology committee, my
Yep.
or community rather. My dad was in radiology imaging for 30 years, and so excited to learn more about MedQuest
Sure.
and more specifically what you guys are doing in from an innovation perspective. But before we do it, we like to kind of dive into a couple things. First and foremost, we like to start the episode with just one piece of actionable advice. So if there was anything you wanted to leave the listeners with today, that you've learned over the course of your journey, what would one thing that came to mind might be?
So one of the things I've learned over time is purge the word impossible from your personal lexicon. Begin with the
Mm,
belief that it is possible and find a pathway to make it possible instead of seeing the obstacle first, see the solution so you can get to the solution.
it's great advice, especially for me as an entrepreneur. I really identify with that because every aspect of the journey, from the starting of the business itself to the first year, I could have seen as insurmountable. Um, but I love what you said about kind of looking for the solution, and that for me, sometimes I personally might not have I might not have the solution. And this is something that I try to coach my team on, and other even clients that we work with. It's like sometimes like not only ask for help, but I have to go find the right people to ask for help, and like just like own it, own it, and like step into trying to figure it out. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
exactly. And until you believe that it is possible, you'll only see things that are the obstacles. And when you do that, you really don't see what can be done.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's just great advice to start the episode, Dr. Patel. And before we jump into again what you guys are up to today at MedQuest, I want to just learn and share with the audience a little bit more about your journey as an executive, obviously an MD, but kind of how you started out and how you got to the point that you're at in your career today, where you're focused more on innovation. Just interested in hearing more about your journey.
Oh, absolutely. I mine is an unusual story, so bear with me. So it's a story of an immigrant dream come true. Really is. I came to the U.S.
We
in
love those.
I came to the U.S. in 1980, landed in Detroit, in a place I did not know, in a language I did not know. Um, I was 12 and in eighth grade. My dad, who was a teacher in India, first came to the U.S. trying to settle us. trying to find so that we can settle down in a place. So after Detroit, I went to Forsyth, Georgia. We started my eighth grade in Georgia, and after a couple of months, we had to move again to Bristol, Tennessee, and then after a couple of months, move again and finish out my year in Jackson, Michigan. While it was tough to move around and learn a new language and assimilate into the American culture, those experiences going from south to north really introduced me to Americana, and
Mm,
that was fantastic, and I would not give that up. And this experience really helped me shape my work ethic and the fact that this is the land of opportunity. And in this land of opportunity, the failure was not an option. And if you work hard, you can succeed. And that's something that was proven out in eighth grade. Um, Despite these challenges, I was able to sort of get a 3.7 GPA in eighth grade and so on. And I had some wonderful teachers who facilitated that. Um, once I graduated uh, from Jackson, I went to my parents had gone to Jersey City, and that's where I went to did the rest of my education in public high school. Where daily safety, it was an inner city public high school, so daily safety was an issue. I met some wonderful
mm,
teachers there as well, and they got me through it. Loved mathematics and loved the sciences, so uh, my love of math drove me to electrical engineering with an end goal of being in medicine. And I'll give you an example as to in a second. At that time, though, that my advisors who had not seen this before, although it was not uncommon, said, "Hey, you can't do engineering and do medicine." But it was something that I just was not willing to give up. I needed to satisfy both my needs, and so I decided to go ahead with it anyway. And it was a wonderful thing. Um, and it's a wonderful thing that our country is one of the few in the world where you can actually do both. So I was uh, really fortunate to have those kind of opportunities. When I went to high school, I graduated as a salutatorian, and then went with electrical engineering with focus on telecommunication and computer engineering, and then went to work for IBM. So I wanted to see what engineering's like, what is to work in engineering. I designed computer chips for mainframe computers, and um, so that was really fulfilling. But I knew since I was a child, observing my grandfather was a country doc. Um, Whether it was in his clinic, working in his clinic, or whether going to home visits with him to, a patient who's having a seizure to abort the seizure, or watching debridement of a wound in his clinic, I knew that's exactly what I wanted to do. So that was always the goal. I just took a different path because early on I saw that there is a connection between engineering and medicine. It was tough to leave a good paying job. I'll be honest with you, but I did then go to medical school at Robert Johnson, and subsequently additional postgraduate training at University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, Temple University Hospital, and eventually at my fellowship at University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. And then I joined the University of Pennsylvania as faculty in radiology and worked there for nearly a decade. Did a small stint in between for in private practice, but that wasn't really for me. And then I was recruited to be a vice chair of operations at Geisinger Health, and that's where I was until I came to MedQuest. I did vice chair of operations. I did additional roles in vice chair for informatics, and eventually was a winner of a search for chair. So that's what I served for the last 8 plus years. In between, though, I was fortunate to work at the Steel Institute for Health Innovation as a medical director for AI, and led radiology informatics and our 3D printing lab. Always believed in the marriage of medicine and technology, medicine and mathematics. And with that belief, at every stage of my career, I did something that sort of demonstrated that. So early on, I did. Very early on in the early 90s, I was introduced to neural networks with one of my partners who was also an engineer. Um, and my mentor said, "Hey, there's something called neural networks. Can you guys go figure it out?" And we did, and we
Mhm.
used it to diagnose aortic stenosis and Doppler echocardiograms. And then similarly, use a cellular automaton model, hybrid model with partial differential equations, model tumor growth. When I was a resident and when I was an attending, went across the street to the engineering school and worked on computational fluid dynamics modeling of IVC filters. And when I moved on, we also did some lump circuit modeling of dialysis flow circuits to really get a better understand how these things operate and when narrowing in vessels become more significant. And eventually led me to sort of full circle back to AI, where we did risk stratification for patient care or diagnosis of things like bleeding in the head. So uh, it's a full circle and very fulfilling.
Yeah, and I had seen that, um, a couple months ago. So we started working with Cedars-Sinai. I saw you presented there
Yeah,
on AI and medicine not too long ago, right?
I did. It was basically a presentation on, yeah, how do you take care of populations, right? How do you keep populations healthy, make diagnosis healthy, and get care to those who need it today? So, for example, we do uh, screening tests on many folks, like whether it's in lung cancer or whether in colon cancer. But there are many more patients who need screening than we have the capacity to do them. So, how do you get to folks who need it today and who are at the highest risk? So using a lot of the AI models, you can actually do risk stratification and provide them and reach out proactively to those folks who are at highest risk and say, "You're in trouble. Come on and let us take care of you."
And see, I love that, Dr. Patel, because like now we're talking customer experience, right? It's like you're not just firing a shot over the bow, like, hey, we're doing screenings, like everybody come on down. We're saying, hey, David, you're 38, in a few years, but just making medicine personalized, right? And I like for me, like that's the initial frontier. Um, as we look at the continuum of healthcare and creating this like kind of connection with the patient that we were able to maintain throughout. How am I enabling, smart devices? How am I, connecting with care at home? Like, and not just for like the elderly, right? Like, how am I using certain systems to, as a health system, promote the health and well-being of my patients before they're sick? Now, I know like now we're kind of getting more into value-based care, right? Because like the fact of the matter is like the hospital doesn't get paid if the patient's well, right? So it's a little bit of a like you have to want that, and I think like from an economic standpoint, like I need to try to be able to do that in such a way that it's not a financial burden to the healthcare provider because their margins are already so tight, right? So it's tricky, but I think that like to me as a consumer, right, getting back to like I guess we were talking about this prior to the podcast, but like um that's a healthcare provider that I want to work with. And like if I'm sick or my family's sick or any like we're all going to use that healthcare provider. So like it's you're thinking about the long game and not just that sale, you know?
Agree, and I think so. There are two additional forces at work here, right? One is that access has become a huge problem for healthcare systems. That means that there's plenty of volume that they cannot accommodate. So
Right,
in on a
right.
first glance, it seems like that it would actually cut into margins, and people don't want to do that. But I actually worry more about people not having access to care, and why don't we get access to care to those who need it first? So that way, margins are theoretically should not diminish, but we're actually taking care of people who need it. And the second thing is when you tell somebody that, hey, you're 45, you need colonoscopy, first reaction is, I really don't want to do that. Um, and um, and but if you tell somebody that you're 45 and we believe that you're 17 times higher risk of finding something bad in your colon, when it sort of wakes them up and changes the conversation, and brings them in, even if they don't want to, they sort of brings them in. So I think
Right.
those are things that help me, uh, sort of get comfortable with the fact that, yes, margins I don't think will go down. 'Cause I haven't seen any evidence of that. But on the other hand, the positivity rate is gonna go up. So if anything, you actually may benefit from the margins.
I agree. Um, so Dr. Patel, I wanna take a step back and, so you described a really cool journey of kind of like, first and foremost, love like, my wife immigrated from Latvia. Her parents, when they came here, didn't speak the language. I just have so much respect and admiration for that. Like, it's just, it's so cool to me. So just, really respect that. But, over the course of your journey, when you think back, what what are some of the most, or one of the most important things that you learned along the way? Or was there a time that you faced adversity, but you ultimately took away a profound lesson? Oftentimes for me, that's some of the most you know uh, profound learnings in my life. But anything that sticks out to you that you'd like to share?
So many learnings throughout my life, right? So I'll try to pick a couple, um, and many of these are connected. So I'm a perfectionist by nature. So a
Mm,
willingness to fail and learn, is the best indicator of future success. I always had trouble failing. Failing does not necessarily mean failure, and that's something that I had to get I had to learn. But if also failing does not mean that you're willing to accept failure. It just means that it's an opportunity to learn. And one thing's clear, and this is what I tell my kids as well, that nothing can be achieved without hard work and perseverance. And that is something that, early on, not knowing the language, and I had to work hard at it, um, but I saw the results. So I'm fully a believer in hard work and perseverance. And this is something that I learned early on about humility. As a 19-year-old student in college, I was fortunate enough to take some grad courses as a sophomore. And, like a confident, I would say overconfident kid who would go sit right in the front and show off, right? So one of the grad students took me aside and said, here's a break. You are coming in and you're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but on the other hand, we're coming in after work, so give us a break. And that sort of stuck with me. That confidence is good, but you have to be humble yet confident, but not overconfident. So think about how people feel about how you present yourself, and that is to me is has become a guiding principle.
I love that. I mean, there's a lot there. Some of the leaders that I respect the most, uh, who are lifelong learners, which you clearly are, right? They embody that humility because it shows a willingness to offer, at least for myself, right?
Yep.
I've started saying this recently. The older I get, the more that I learn, and the less that I realize I know. It's just because there is so much about different cultures, about different sciences, about the universe, about there's just so much, right?
There it
For
is.
me to think that I know, right? That kind of that ego that I really hung my hat on in my 20s, I would say, mid to late 20s. Mainly to hide up my own insecurities, like, that was, it didn't serve me, right? So I had that moment as well. And then the first thing that you mentioned about the willingness to learn and accept failing, but it's not failure, mincing your words a little bit, but, uh, I'm encountering that so much nowadays. in healthcare, uh, innovation requires failing. I think the term failing fast is overused, right? But I mean, it's true. Like, how am I accepting failure in a controlled environment, integrating that feedback and keeping it moving? And it doesn't have to, it's not a character flaw. It has nothing to do with me as a person. It's an opportunity to learn, which you mentioned. And true innovation requires that, right? And I think that so often we find when we encounter organizations where they've they've ingratiated themselves in a culture of fear,
Yeah.
where you've been ruled with, "We gotta get it done. We gotta get it done yesterday." People are bonused and structured a certain way, like, they don't wanna fail, and it actually hinders innovation because it makes people afraid to make small decisions. It creates this inertia, this failure to act, and that is a big enemy of innovation. Um, and the last thing that I'll say, because you just said so many good things that like sparked ideas. There was a lady I met with. She's a chief strategy officer at one of the larger health systems on the East Coast. I met with her 4 years back, and we had started working with RWJ Barnabas Health, and we were getting our footing, but we were still fairly small. And she's like, "David, you seem like a nice enough guy, and it sounds like you know what you're saying, like talking about. I honestly couldn't like, you know, qualify that either way. And so for those reasons, like I think we're a little much for you right now. And also, you're gonna have to talk to some other people within the organization who could actually validate what you're saying." But I wish you the best. And she was really lovely. Like she really was. I'm like kind of being tongue in cheek about it, but she was like, "Listen, you're too small, and like also I can't really qualify what you do." So I took that. Long story short, ended up navigating the organization, talking to the right people. There wasn't any opportunity at the time for what we can offer, but they knew about it, and then we stayed in touch, and then kept growing as a company. Now we're engaging with that health system now, nearly 4 years later, right? And so when we talk about perseverance, and for me, it's also too about like, how am I, instead of being concerned about what I'm selling, really focused on connecting with that human being such that I can form a relationship with them that isn't contingent on what I'm selling.
Yes.
Like how can it be about being of service to one another without expectation? And then if my experience can be useful, they're gonna want to leverage it. And if it can't, then I'm trying to shove a square peg in a round hole anyway, and that's not really in line with my ethics or my ethos. So um I so often I feel like sales organizations and other uh consulting, like, they're just, I don't know, I think they're doing it wrong. I think if they focused more on the individual and less about what was in their bag of tricks, that they could actually be more successful.
Oh yeah, I mean, don't try hard to sell a thing. Probably build those relationships, and then the selling comes on its own, right? So
That's been my
yeah.
experience. I know that's a little off topic, but so I want to talk, Dr. Patel, about your MedQuest a little bit more. Before we do, I always just like to ask my guests, favorite book, either that you've been reading recently or all time, or just something that you comes to mind, kind of dealer's choice.
So more than a favorite book, I've been focusing more on content on the internet or podcasts and things like that. So every day, because this is the variety of interests that I have, I look at 5 different things. One is Becker's, of course, to make sure that I'm keeping up with the news in the health space.
Yep. Hmm.
There is a publication called Medium, and I look at Medium Daily Digest to catch me up on AI
Yeah.
related news.
Yep.
EE Times, because that's my first love. So that really catches me up on what's going on in electrical engineering and in electronic space. space news because I've been a forever space buff. I'm really disappointed with that. What happened with the Starship? But he'll get it right. That's again uh, failing fast and and innovating and to making changes to get to where you need to be. Squawk Box. There's a summary podcast I listen to. I don't have 3 hours in the morning to listen to this podcast, the whole thing, but I do that. And the next step that I'm trying to do is that there are some task tools available on either Gemini or OpenAI, which I can sort of um, use to deliver the content for me to consume in an concise fashion. So maybe I'll figure out how to do that. So that's my those are the things I look at. It sort of gives me a summary of what I need to know.
Tools of a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
I love it. Uh, so, I gotta check a couple of those out myself. It's been a while since I did the Medium, since I checked them out, and anyway, I digress. So Dr. Patel, you're, Chief Clinical and Innovation Officer at MedQuest. You've been there how long now?
It's about a year now.
About a year now. So talk to us a little bit about your vision, for your aspect of the organization, based on the overall mission of what MedQuest is looking to do, and maybe some of the key initiatives that you're focused on.
So simply put, when somebody hears and that you're going to an imaging center that is powered by MedQuest, want immediate impression from the patient that it is a good center. It is powered by MedQuest means it's high quality, portable, with the best radiologists, best equipment, and best trained technologies taking care of you. And of course, patient experience has to be there as well. So that's the feeling I want from our patients. They have to feel like they're being cared for in a very thoughtful manner, and they are and our team certainly provides that. So that's the ultimate vision. Um, but we do in order to accomplish that, we do face some challenges, and those challenges are workforce shortages, which nationally we are facing 15% shortage in radiology technologists. And just recently, I didn't have quantification, but recently there's quantification that we're facing shortage of 18% of radiologists. And that's only going to get worse because many of the radiologists are over 50 and many of them are over 60. So they're going to be retiring. So there will be a cliff. So how do you solve for that? And that's something that we're really focusing on. And so those are the challenges that we're focusing on. And that's my current mission. Number one is to make sure that we're giving the best care to our patients. And I truly believe in a family standard care, right? So that means that I would provide to any patient of mine the care that my family gets. And that's the ultimate goal. Without that, we're not achieving our goal.
And so I know, through our pursuits that some of the things that we're being able to do now with, I hate just using AI as a word, right? But like AI, like imaging specific AI use cases for, um, actually pre-screening images prior to them reaching a rad tech or a radiologist, and kind of prioritizing them and things of that order in regard to mitigating some of the workforce shortages that I imagine that could be useful. We still haven't deployed any of those technologies ourselves yet. Are you looking into any of those types of technologies, or what are some of the innovative technologies that you're looking into in order to, you know, address some of those challenges?
Yeah. So with all these shortages, access is a big issue, right? So we need to look at everything ranging from scheduling when the patient comes to us, how do we prioritize patients and so on, to optimizing our how do you use AI to improve image quality, reduce noise, speed up image acquisition and reconstruction. So when you have equipment that requires a long time to scan, or If it's older equipment, it can't do the job it needs to do in order to take care of patients. It takes that long time, takes away some of the access for other patients. So I think optimizing it's trifecta: image quality, reducing noise, and speeding up acquisition is the ultimate goal, and that's something that we are currently investing in and in many cases already deployed. So that's the one part of it. The second part is how do we make sure that after we acquire the images, how do we help the radiologists, right? So as they are forced to do more and more and more, there's always a chance that you're going to make an error. So how do we combine AI and radiologists' expertise to make sure that we're making the radiologists a better radiologist with augmentation from AI? So that's the other thing that and that incorporation of the workflow is a ever changing and evolving space. So we're figuring out how to do that. If you do it wrong, it actually increases radiologist's work and not actually help anything. But there are many use cases where you can actually improve the radiologist's accuracy, help them to achieve better confidence, and also reduce burnout. I think that's the ultimate goal, because as you may know, 55% of radiologists report that they're burning out, and that's not a sustainable pace. Um, so we need to make sure that we're focusing on all of those aspects. So that's one thing. The other thing we're working on and actually doing is remote workflows. So as we have, um, whether it's MRIs especially, which are not radiation emitting, we are able to be sitting. We can serve imaging center in Virginia, and our virtual technologist is in Florida, right? Just for an example. And that has been tremendous for us when it comes to opening up access. Um, Quality and safety is paramount for us. So we took all the precautions to make sure that that one person who is on site taking care of our patient is one sole purpose is to make sure patient is comfortable and patient is safe. And then the remote person can then scan the patient. So that
Have
way.
you guys sorry to interrupt you, Doctor, but I just had a question like that what you just mentioned, um, brought to mind. Like, what are your current hours of operation at MedQuest, like, for a given site?
So it varies from all from the 50 centers that we have. So anywhere from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. to in some cases or to in some cases 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So, but it varies. So you usually have first and second shift.
That's awesome. I mean, it's great to hear that, like, 7 p.m., 10 p.m., because, like, what you mentioned with the, um kind of the virtual, uh, rad tech or whatever, like, if I have somebody on the West Coast and, like, that location would have otherwise been open till 7 o'clock, now I can have them reading images until, 7 o'clock at their 4 o'clock, right? So, like, that's pretty cool, and when we talk about access to care, I feel like so often, like, for doctor's appointments in particular, and less so radiology and certain specialties, but more so, like, primary care or optometry or some like they work like banker's hours or like maybe like till like 5:30, maybe 6, but then that's it. So if I'm working till 5:36, I'm either needing to get off from work to try to go there during the day, and especially for like a well-ish visit where I'm not like dying, but I'm like I need to see a doctor, not going after work can be tricky for a lot of people, right? So I just love that you guys are offering that level of access.
Yeah, and absolutely, and that's yeah. If we talk to our team members and if we talk to our JV partners, um, access is a number one priority for majority of them because the healthcare needs are increasing, right? Our population is aging, and as that happens, we need to provide that in a treaty way.
Love it. So a couple last questions for you, Dr. Patel. One would be, um, in regard to the radiology or even healthcare industry in general, where do you see the industry going in the future? Or and or, what do you think will be some of the biggest changes as time passes? Again, with the acknowledgement that you don't have a crystal ball.
Yes, that's one of the things when somebody asked me that, "Hey, what do you see?" Somebody once said that exponents are difficult to, you always underestimate the exponent, right? You might be able to predict short term, but long term, you're always certainly going to be wrong because the technology will outpace your thinking. So
Amen.
I'll answer it in a couple ways, right? So if you look at from a medicine perspective, for radiology perspective, especially as the population ages and resources are constrained, we'll continue to see intense demand for healthcare, and particularly imaging, because imaging needs are ever increasing. And these challenges are acting as a forcing function that will drive innovation, not only to improve care, but also reducing workforce burnout. Um, AI will certainly be a part of that solution, and perhaps at the center of this, but not the only thing. I'm sure there'll be other innovations that happen with that. Um, but AI perhaps can also be used to really drive to distinguish between appropriate demand and inappropriate demand. Sometimes we do testing that may not always be appropriate, and especially when it's radiation. When you're giving radiation to the patient, you got to be really careful. So perhaps
Mhm.
modifying the curve based on some of the AI tools will be important, and especially in a value-based care environment, right? We don't have an unlimited pot of money, and as we try to spend that more effectively, let's get to care to patients who need it. It's easier to say and than to do, but it's something that we need to strive for. And from an AI technology perspective, the large language vision models will certainly replace the current methodologies, and there are many more coming out every day. And of course, LLMs in conjunction with that will replace a lot of the models. And I'm an eternal optimist, so I'll make a statement which will be controversial, but because most people don't agree with it, is that even if you achieve AGI or artificial general intelligence or artificial super intelligence, we'll likely collaborate with machines to improve human condition. Again, it might be with my rose-colored glasses, but that is my hope. Um,
Yeah. I believe I think I believe much the same, and, before I was just gonna add, like, a lot of what you're describing, like, we talked about what you were talking on at Cedars, like, we're talking about these solutions, and they're driven by data, right? Like, so how do we better leverage the data that we're collecting as an organization, publicly available data, data over here. How do we leverage all of that to better understand and treat our, constituents? And so very cool stuff. I mean, very insightful, and Dr. Patel, this has been awesome. Last question I like to ask all of my guests is just if you could go back 5, 10, 15, even 20 years in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
in keeping with my eternal learning appetite, I'll say learn more, learn faster, and starting earlier in your career. I've
Mm,
always wanted to learn, and sometimes your career path while you're learning that slows down as you're trying to grow in your career. But I think
mm.
you need to strive to always learn because that's a valuable time lost.
Yeah, no, that's good advice, man. Good advice for me to hear personally. Um, Dr. Patel, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
It has been indeed a pleasure, and thank you for making time for me.
Of course. And to our listeners, thank you all for tuning in, and we will catch you all next week.